Good Sunday morning. Moments from now, my exclusive interview with Vice President Mike Pence. The U.S. sends a message to China, Iran, and Turkey, and the push to get President Trump to declassify more parts of that recently released FISA application. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Welcome to Sunday Morning Futures. He is one of President Trump's closest advisors and often represents America on the president's behalf. Now, Vice President Mike Pence talks exclusively with me about that strong second quarter GDP number, tariffs, taxes 2.0, trade, Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, and the Vice President's upcoming trip to Hawaii to receive the remains of Americans killed in the Korean War. Also this morning, reaction to that, plus America's message overseas from Senator Lindsey Graham, a member of both the Armed Services and Judiciary Committees. Also this morning, House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes is here on his efforts to declassify more of the FISA documents on former Trump campaign aide Carter Page, as we look ahead right now on Sunday Morning Futures. All that ahead, but first, my exclusive interview with Vice President Mike Pence. And we begin with the very latest evidence of a roaring U.S. economy. The president addressed that stellar second quarter GDP number on Friday morning outside of the White House. And right behind him stood the vice president, whom I caught up with a short time afterward. Mr. Vice President, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you for having me here at this historic room. Let's talk about the economic data first off. 4.1% growth. Your reaction? We were expecting a big number.
Well, it's a great day for America. See in the second quarter 4.1% growth, exports growing dramatically. That added to the reality of 3.7 million new jobs created since Election Day 2016. I couldn't be more proud to serve alongside a president who's been working every day to keep the promise he made to the American people, to roll back red tape, to cut taxes, unleash American energy. And I think this 4.1% quarter and a year that's on track for more than 3% growth is a testament to the president's leadership and his vision for this economy.
What were the most important takeaways from this quarter? A lot of conversation about whether or not this is a one-quarter thing or whether or not we're going to see this sustain.
Well, it's important to recognize in context that the reality is in the last two administrations, the economy grew by less than 2%. And in the first 18 months of this administration, we were a little shy of 3% last year. We're on track to be at 3% or better this year. And we really believe the internals of these numbers, whether it be the dramatic increase in business investment, a dramatic increase in American exports, all support the conclusion that the policies that President Trump has been advancing, that a Republican Congress has been supporting, are actually working to revive this economy. But you sense real momentum. You know, I was in North Dakota and Montana this week, and West Virginia just a couple of days ago, and you sense out on the street talking to everyday Americans, talking to business leaders, that the best is yet to come. That these numbers tell the tale, but the enthusiasm and the confidence all across this country among business leaders and businesses large and small tells the same story and more.
Mr. Vice President, how much of this quarter was goosed by businesses trying to get ahead of the president's tariffs? There is a narrative out there that China, for example, was rushing to buy more soybeans, buy crude oil and other commodities so that they would get ahead of the president's tariffs that haven't taken effect yet.
Well, we've heard that theory, but the reality is when you look at the whole quarter, American exports were up by more than 9%. And our trade deficit was down by $50 billion. You know, you heard the president say on Friday just how enthusiastic he was about seeing our trade deficit coming down. And we really think we're just getting started. So we don't believe this was a reaction to the president's strong leadership in renegotiating our trade relationships. A great breakthrough this last week with the European Union. Now the United States and the EU are going to begin working toward a trade arrangement that has zero tariffs, zero non-tariff barriers, and really opens up commerce between our two countries in new and in renewed ways, as well as having the EU commit to immediately begin to buy more soybeans from American farmers. So we think we're seeing real progress. We don't think this was an anomaly. We think American exports are on the rise as a reflection of a strong economy and, frankly, a reflection of the president's strong leadership on improving our trade relationships for American jobs and American workers.
When do you expect the president will be able to announce another solid official trade deal? Will you be able to announce trade deals before the midterm elections, for example?
Well, we're very encouraged about the progress that we're making in discussions about the North American Free Trade Agreement. I know the U.S. Trade Representative continues to believe that there's a possibility that before we get to Labor Day, we may have a reformed NAFTA agreement. But those details are still being worked out. But look, the president came into this administration with the belief that for too long, Americans, our economy, our workers have been taken advantage of by imbalanced trade deals. And whether it be in renegotiating South Korea, whether it be opening up markets to American exports and agricultural goods, renegotiating NAFTA, or resetting the balance in our relationship with the European Union, and of course, resetting the balance or huge imbalance with China. We really believe that kind of strong leadership on behalf of American jobs and workers is actually contributing to the momentum that we saw in these second quarter numbers.
Do you think you'll have a deal with Mexico by Labor Day?
Well, we remain hopeful that in the coming months that we'll be able to reach an agreement. But I can assure you that President Trump's going to continue to stay focused on American manufacturing and American agriculture, and we're going to renegotiate NAFTA in a way that's a win for working Americans in the city and on the farm.
Mr. Vice President, some lawmakers criticized the meeting with the EU and Mr. Juncker. 24 lawmakers said that this is impacting their chances of re-election come November. You've got Andy Barr, for example, in Kentucky, saying, well, the bourbon makers in Kentucky are being hurt by the retaliatory tariffs out of Europe. You've got Mr. Huzanga of Michigan complaining about high raw material prices. Is this going to impact those races?
We think a better trade relationship with the European Union, a more fair, more reciprocal trade relationship, is going to benefit every American. And look, we respect members of Congress. It's remarkable to think all the progress that we've made in the last 18 months has been made in partnership with Republican majorities, but it's been against an unprecedented level of Democrat obstruction. It is amazing to think, just as an aside, Maria, that in the last year and a half, our administration has faced more filibusters called by Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in the Senate by a factor of 4 times more than any administration going all the way back to the Carter administration. So we respect members of Congress. We respect them standing up for interest in their district. But we're grateful for the support they provided for the president's agenda, and we remain confident that as we reset the balance in those trading relationships, that it's going to win for their districts and win for America.
But the lack of Democratic support brings me to my next question, which is about Tax Cuts 2.0. Now, you're working on another plan to lower taxes, trying to make the individual cuts permanent. But is this just a ploy to make sure to remind the American people that yours is the party of tax cuts right before the midterm elections? Because the truth is, you're not going to get any Democratic support for that. Or do you really believe this economy needs more stimulus?
You know, President Trump and I have worked very closely with the Republican leadership to fashion Tax Cuts 2.0. The reality is that before Christmas last year, President Trump signed the largest tax cuts and tax reform in American history. And I think the enthusiasm that you see among everyday Americans, the investment that we saw in this last quarter by American businesses, is an affirmation of that tax cut package that was passed. But President Trump absolutely believes it's important that we make tax cuts permanent. We're going to work with members of Congress to move this legislation forward, even as it's unveiled in the coming weeks. And I promise you, in the years ahead, President Trump is going to continue to look for ways we can let the American people keep more of what they earn, and we can create the kind of reforms in our tax code that will encourage businesses to invest here and create jobs here in the USA.
The president recently tweeted about the Federal Reserve, and he said, you know, it's crazy that the Federal Reserve is going to be raising interest rates. If the economy is so great, why not raise interest rates?
Well, look, we respect the independence of the Federal Reserve, and the president reflected his own personal opinion about that. But what we don't want to see happen going forward is we don't want policies, whether Capitol Hill or elsewhere, that diminish the tremendous energy that we have in this economy today. Look, as I said before, as I travel across this country, you sense the confidence that Americans feel again, in a very real sense. It's like a steel worker said in Granite City, Illinois yesterday, with tears in his eyes. He said, we're back. And I sense that all across the country. People see in President Trump someone who has a boundless confidence in the American future, but also they see a president who's been keeping his promises to cut taxes, roll back red tape, unleash American energy, and the American people are responding. I mean, the second quarter numbers, 4.1% growth, on track this year for 3% growth. After 16 years that averaged less than 2%, it's a testament to the president's determination and leadership. It's a testament to the members of Congress and partners in the Republican majorities that have supported the president. And it's also a testament to the ingenuity, the resilience, the determination, and the confidence of the American people in President Trump's vision.
That ingenuity is being robbed by the Chinese. Let's talk China for a moment, because the president is using tariffs as a way to leverage to get the Chinese from stop stealing from us. We know that China has been stealing intellectual property for decades, transferring technology. Are tariffs the answer to get them to stop? They won't even admit they're doing it.
When you look at our trade deficit around the world, nearly $800 billion on an annual basis. Maria, as you know well, fully half of that is with China. I mean, for too long, China has had virtually unfettered access to the American economy and the American consumer, and American companies have faced significant barriers. And the issues that you raise represent a genuine threat to our economy. It's absolutely essential that we protect intellectual property from being stolen by interest in China. It's absolutely essential that we end the forced technology transfers that exist. Well, we remain confident as the president takes a strong stand and we continue to pursue a policy of raising barriers until we achieve a reciprocal relationship with China. I truly believe, based on the relationship that President Trump has forged with President Xi, and frankly, based on some things that President Xi has said on precisely those issues. A recent speech several months ago, President Xi, many reported for the very first time, talked about the need to address and protect intellectual property and end forced technology transfers. And we believe raising those issues and recognizing the need for a more fair and balanced trade relationship gives us hope that we can improve this relationship. And make no mistake about it, President Trump is going to continue to stand strong until we achieve free, fair, and reciprocal trade relationship with China.
I've got to ask you about access to you and the president and this White House. Was it necessary to throw out Caitlin Collins from CNN the other day? What happened?
Well, let me say that this administration believes in the freedom of the press. And President Trump and our entire administration have provided extraordinary access to the media. The president answers so many questions in so many different settings, and I can assure you that we'll continue to do that. But maintaining the decorum that is due at the White House, I think, is an issue that we'll continue to work forward. But I'm very confident that whether it be with that network or any members of the media, that we'll continue to work in a way that ensures the access of the American people to this administration and to all the incredible progress we're making.
Because on this day, she was the pool reporter, so she was actually representing all of us. I mean, did you feel like kicking her out kicked out everybody?
Well, I would leave that decision to the White House staff, and I just remain very confident. Look, the relationship between any White House and any press corps is always, is always healthy and robust, and occasionally represents disagreements. I'm confident that they'll be able to work out this relationship in a positive way. We'll make sure that every network, every major news organization continues to have access, because we stand for the freedom of the press in this White House.
More of my exclusive interview with the Vice President on the Republican strategy coming up for the midterm elections. Follow me on Twitter at Maria Bartiromo at Sunday Futures. Stay with us as we look ahead. We've got a lot coming up. More of Vice President Pence, as well as Lindsey Graham and Devin Nunes coming up. Welcome back. More now from my exclusive interview with Vice President Mike Pence as we're just 100 days away from the midterm elections. Mr. Vice President, the stakes are high going into the midterm elections. You've been traveling a lot, I know that. Tell us what your priorities are going into the midterms.
Our priorities is to make sure that we not only re-elect, but that we expand Republican majorities on Capitol Hill. You know, as I mentioned before, Maria, our administration has faced unprecedented obstruction by the Democrats in Washington, D.C. It's amazing to think in a week that this economy grew by more than 4%, which was a national goal the president articulated during the campaign in the fall of 2016. And we're on track for 3% growth. Not one single Democrat in Congress voted for those historic tax cuts. The president's efforts to roll back red tape, unleash American energy, have met with incredible obstruction. And in this administration, we have literally faced 4 times more filibusters in our first 2 years than any of the last administrations going all the way back to Jimmy Carter. So what the president and I believe, and we're traveling across the country, is that we need to communicate that we need to re-elect our Republican majorities, but we need to have more Republicans in the House and Senate. As the American people see what the president's doing, as they're enthusiastic about the president's commitment to economic growth, to a stronger military, to America standing tall in the world again and fighting for American jobs, those same Americans should know that we've only been able to do that because of partners on Capitol Hill. We'll only be able to continue to build on the momentum in this economy with more partners. And so we're going to fight to re-elect and expand these Republican majorities.
All right, quick break, but more from my exclusive interview with Vice President Mike Pence, what he wants Americans to know about Supreme Court nominee Judge Brett Kavanaugh next. Plus, a showdown with Turkey over a jailed American pastor. And North Korea returns the remains of our fallen heroes. Plus, Senator Lindsey Graham is coming up live along with House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes. We're looking ahead, a lot to cover this morning on Sunday Morning Futures. Back in a moment. Welcome back. In my exclusive interview with Vice President Mike Pence, he told me he's expecting Judge Brett Kavanaugh to be confirmed as the Supreme Court justice before the midterm election. This comes as only 2 Senate Democrats, both up for re-election in red states, have so far agreed to meet with Judge Kavanaugh.
Judge Brett Kavanaugh is a man of integrity, and he's a judge with an extraordinary record of service on the Court of Appeals. Literally one of the most distinguished legal minds in the country, with a proven record of support for limited government, for our Second Amendment, for religious liberty. And what I would say to every member of the Senate is that Judge Brett Kavanaugh deserves a fair hearing and deserves their support to be confirmed as the next justice of the Supreme Court of the United States.
The left is trying to make this about abortion. Is it about abortion for you?
For the President of the United States, in this deliberation, he was looking for a judge with extraordinary credentials and intellect, but also a judge who would strictly interpret the Constitution as written and not legislate from the bench. Judge Brett Kavanaugh has that judicial philosophy. He has a proven record. That's what the President made this nomination about. That's the message we'll carry to Republicans and Democrats in the Senate, and we remain confident that before the fall is out, that Judge Brett Kavanaugh will be Justice Brett Kavanaugh.
You're going to be meeting next week with the families of the remains that are being sent from North Korea. A lot of people are very emotional about this. Why are you going to meet with those families?
Maria, President Trump has asked me to do many things on his behalf as Vice President, but frankly, I've never been more humbled or more honored to be asked to represent him as the remains of American heroes from the Korean War arrive back on American soil. My dad was in the U.S. Army. He fought in combat in the Korean War. He fought on Pork Chop Hill and some of the legendary battles that took place there. He came home with a medal on his chest, but my dad, who's gone now 30 years, raised us to understand that he always thought the heroes of the Korean War were the ones that didn't get to come home. And the fact that this president, sitting down with Kim Jong-un to negotiate the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, also had our fallen heroes on his heart, should tell you everything you need to know about President Donald Trump. And my wife and I are deeply moved and deeply honored to be able to be there when we bring our boys home.
Good luck with that, and I know that America is watching, and with just as much emotion. Final question, Mr. Vice President. You and the President have spoken about large sanctions against Turkey, a NATO ally. You've threatened to impose large sanctions if the country does not release the American pastor who's currently under house arrest. And here's the tweet. The United States will impose large sanctions on Turkey for their longtime detainment of Pastor Andrew Brunson, a great Christian, family man, and wonderful human being, tweeted the president. You're going to go the whole way with this? You're going to put sanctions if he's not released?
Pastor Andrew Brunson is an innocent man. He's a man of profound Christian faith who has ministered in Turkey for more than 20 years. He was swept up in arrests that followed the coup attempt in 2016. There's no credible evidence of any wrongdoing against him. Pastor Brunson was actually held for nearly a year without ever being charged. And for the last several years, he literally has been in a Turkish prison. From early in this administration, President Trump and I have engaged President Erdogan and the Turkish government directly to release Pastor Andrew Brunson and send him home. Those negotiations have been ongoing, and they have been continuous. Now, we welcome the news this week that Turkey made the decision to transfer Pastor Brunson to home arrest, to his apartment in Turkey. And I actually spoke to Pastor Brunson and his wife shortly after they arrived. But he wants to come home. And Pastor Andrew Brunson should be freed and should be allowed to return to his family, to his home, to his church and his nation in the United States of America. I mean, the truth is, as I said earlier this week, the president's made clear, transferring Pastor Andrew Brunson to home arrest is just not good enough. And the United States of America is prepared to bring sanctions against Turkey until Pastor Andrew Brunson is free.
Have you gotten a response from Turkey yet?
We have heard from certain officials in Turkey, but we've made it very clear, and we will continue to, that this innocent man of faith should be released and allowed to return to the United States of America. And President Trump and I are going to continue to take a strong stand and are prepared to bring sanctions against Turkey until Pastor Andrew Brunson is free.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And since my conversation with the Vice President about that, the State Department says Secretary of State Pompeo spoke to the Turkish Foreign Minister Saturday about the case of Pastor Andrew Brunson. The State Department says the Secretary and Minister are, quote, committed to continued discussions to resolve the matter and address other issues of common concern. This as Turkey's president is speaking out, saying that Turkey will not back down in the face of the U.S. sanctions threat. After my interview with the Vice President, and by the way, that interview took place in the Eisenhower Executive Office building in his ceremonial office, but after the interview, Vice President Pence took me on a tour of his private office inside the West Wing, a place that you can imagine is full of history, including some of that is very personal to the Vice President. The Vice President showed me a photograph of his father, Second Lieutenant Edward J. Pence, receiving the Bronze Star for his service in the Korean War for heroic achievement, as well as the medal itself. He showed me both of which he proudly displays. You can see much more of this rare glimpse inside the Vice President's private office tomorrow morning on Mornings with Maria on the Fox Business Network. Join us tomorrow morning, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern. Still ahead, Senator Lindsey Graham is here. He sits on both the Armed Services and Judiciary Committees on North Korea, China, Iran, the Supreme Court nominee, Judge Brett Kavanaugh. All topics of discussion for Lindsey Graham as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. Next. Welcome back. We just heard from Vice President Mike Pence on North Korea, the Trump administration urging patience for the process of denuclearization, with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo last week saying that the country is still producing nuclear fuel. Meanwhile, the North is delivering on a promise to return the remains of U.S. service members killed in the Korean War. What does that all mean for the ultimate goal of dismantling North Korea's nuclear arsenal? Let's bring in Senator Lindsey Graham, who sits on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Your thoughts on where we are in this? I'm sorry?
A lot to talk about.
Yes.
North Korea, my thoughts. I think the only reason that we're moving forward with North Korea is that President Trump convinced China and North Korea he was serious about them giving up their nuclear program. And in return, they'll have security and prosperity. Having the remains returned to the United States is much appreciated by the families and the country as a whole. But we're looking for complete, irreversible, verifiable denuclearization. I fear that North Korea and China are trying to run the clock out. China has pulled North Korea back because we're in a trade dispute with China. So if I were President Trump, I'd keep the pressure on. I'd be willing to walk away. And the only way you're going to get a deal that really matters is to convince China and North Korea we'll use the military option to stop their nuclear program if we have to.
And do you think that the North believes that now, or has it been emboldened by new strength coming from China?
I think China is undercutting President Trump when it comes to North Korea. But I think North Korea believes that President Trump will not allow them to develop a capability to hit the American homeland with a nuclear weapon. He has set his policy in stone: complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization. Iran is watching. Russia is watching. The only way we'll get there is to put a deadline on this. President Trump said he wanted this to happen in his first term. I see the timeline slipping. That worries me. But the only way we've made any progress with North Korea is because Trump has been strong in the eyes of North Korea and China, and you have to stay strong. I don't want a war with North Korea, but if there's going to be one, it's going to be in China's backyard, not America's backyard, and I hope China understands that.
Well, let me move on to the other nuclear power, Russia, and the potential for sanctions. Do you want to see sanctions again put against Russia?
100%. I will give President Trump credit for being tougher on Russia than Obama. That is without a doubt clear. You know, arming the Ukraine, expelling diplomats, imposing sanctions tougher than Obama did. But it's not working, Maria. They're still trying to interfere in our election. This week was good news for me in two ways. The president met with the National Security Council Friday, ordering them to harden our electoral infrastructure against Russia and other actors for the 2018 election. That's presidential leadership I've been looking for. I've talked to the Homeland Security folks. I've talked to everybody in the government. I think a good package is coming out of this administration to protect the 2018 election. Pompeo told Menendez that he would work with myself and Senator Menendez and other groups to put new sanctions on the table for Russia. I'm going to come out with sanctions from hell on Russia because what we're doing is not working.
Well, the president said that we're not going to see Vladimir Putin come meet with the president at the White House until after what the president called the witch hunt is over. Let me ask you about the Michael Cohen news. He taped his client, which seems unprecedented to me. And now Rudy Giuliani is saying this morning that they tampered with that tape.
You know, the one thing about Michael Cohen is that I've never seen a lawyer behave this way in my entire life, and I've been a lawyer most of my adult life. When it comes to Michael Cohen, you should be very suspicious of anything he says. He's on the hot seat. He's looking at going to jail, so people like him are subject to making things up. And I can tell you this, I talked to Richard Burr yesterday. Michael Cohen has already appeared before Congress talking about a lot of things. And this idea that he told Trump about the Russian meeting before it happened is, to us, very much new news. So, Mr. Cohen, if you got something new to say, you need to come to Congress and say it under oath.
In terms of him saying it under oath, do you think that's a possibility? Will he actually testify again?
I don't know, but I am tired of having President Trump tried in the media. This is the oddest way to communicate with Mueller, is to leak a story to NBC News that you got some new information about the Russia meeting regarding President Trump. I've been a lawyer all my adult life. I've never seen that work. That's a media strategy. So I know what Cohen had said in the past about President Trump not knowing anything about this meeting He's on record, Cohen is, and if he's got something new to say, don't leak it to NBC News. You need to come to either the Judiciary Committee, the Intel Committee, or both, and be willing to say what you're going to say under oath. And to every American, if I were you, I would be very suspicious of Michael Cohen right now.
Senator, I've got to switch and ask you about Iran. Stay with us. We've got a lot more to come with Senator Lindsey Graham, who's with us live this morning. We're looking ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. Back in a moment. Welcome back. We are back now with Senator Lindsey Graham, a member of the Senate Armed Services and Judiciary Committees. Senator, it seems like the Trump administration is quietly pushing ahead with a bid to create a new security and political alliance with the Middle East to go against Iran.
Yes.
Give us the latest in terms of your viewpoints of Iran, where we're seeing more provocations against this president.
Yeah. I've never been more pleased with President Trump than I am right now regarding Iran. He's working with the Arabs and Israel to isolate Iran. The European Union needs to help us. Instead of doing business with the Ayatollah, who's a religious Nazi, who's dismembering the Mideast, who wants a nuclear weapon and will use it one day, our European friends should join with the United States to break the back of this regime. The Iranian people are our friends. The Ayatollah is our enemy. And I like the idea of withdrawing from the nuclear agreement. He took the money, the Ayatollah did, and spent it on his military. The people are just about had it with the Ayatollah. There was a sign out in the streets during the Obama era. Are you with us or are you with them? To my European friends, are you with the Ayatollah or are you with the Iranian people? Keep it up, Mr. President. Keep it up, Secretary Pompeo. Break the Iranian regime's back. Regime change is coming to Iran.
It's a fair question. And then there's China. The president had a good meeting with the EU, apparently. Do you think this strengthens the unity of Europe and the U.S. together to go up against China's bad behavior?
That's the only way you'll bring about change. The WTO doesn't work when it comes to China. The European Union, Japan, all these nations are being affected by unfair Chinese trade practices. Here's how this movie ends. Get a deal with Europe. They heavily subsidize Airbus, and that hurts Boeing. They have a 10% tariff on cars coming into Europe made in America. It's 2.5% if you sell a car into America from Europe. Let's go to zero as soon as we can, get rid of these subsidies, unite and reform the WTO, and tell China, if you want to stay in the WTO, we're going to have new rules you have to abide by. Either kick them out or we get out, one of the two, because the WTO is not working. He's been tough on China, that's for sure, and poking holes in that as well.
Let me ask you real quick before you go, Senator, do you have the votes to confirm Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court? You just heard the vice president tell me he's expecting a confirmation before the midterms.
There's a lot of doubt in this world when it comes to Brett Kavanaugh. I have zero doubt he's going to be on the Supreme Court before the end of October. He's highly qualified, well-deserving. We're going to break the back of every Democratic effort to stop this good man from being on the Supreme Court. The president could not have chosen better. He's going to get confirmed with Democratic votes.
All right. Well, we'll see if one of those votes is Donnelly or Manchin, which, of course, is going to be meeting with next week. Good to see you, sir.
Thanks, both.
Thanks so much. We will see you soon, Senator. Senator Lindsey Graham. House Republicans are working to declassify key portions of the FISA documents, meanwhile, on former Trump campaign aide Carter Page. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes will join me next, live. Back in a minute. Welcome back to Sunday Morning Futures. My next guest has been pushing for President Trump to declassify key parts of the highly redacted Carter Page FISA application. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes joins me right now from the World Ag Expo in Tulare. Good to see you, sir. Thanks very much for joining us.
Nice to see you, Maria. Thank you.
Yeah, I have here the FISA warrant in my hand, and it's incredible the number of redactions. Every page is blacked out, Congressman, and I want to ask you about that because you basically said, look, this has to be declassified in order for the American people to understand. Tell us why.
Well, it's kind of like Groundhog Day. If you remember a few weeks ago when I was in New York and on your show, we were talking about the heavy redactions that were done to the House Intelligence Committee's report that actually had the information on what Russia was doing in the election. However, it had been totally redacted, so the public couldn't see it, while in the meantime, the media was essentially attacking the Republicans' work. Well, now here you have another situation where with the FISA that we fought so hard to make sure the public is understood that Clinton paid for dirt was used to get a warrant to spy on an American citizen using our secret counterintelligence capabilities in this country. So now, I can't see it, but you held it up, I think roughly 75% of that FISA that came out last week that, look, and we're glad this came out for the public to see, but at the same time, there's so much that's redacted, Maria. And if you notice what the left and the mainstream media said, because once we were exonerated once this came out, because we had put out a memo where we had said that this dossier or the dirt was used to get a FISA warrant. We were exonerated last weekend. But now, if you look at what they were saying, they said, oh, but the really juicy stuff, it's actually the really stuff that proves collusion and how bad Carter Page really was and how they were colluding with Russians, that's what's redacted. Well, that was kind of the news for 48 hours. But once the left and the media found out that the House Republicans on the Intelligence Committee had asked back in June for the president to declassify up to 20 pages, you hear crickets. You hear nothing. You don't hear them. They don't want that unredacted. They don't want transparency for the American people. So the president has the letter from us. I think his lawyers are looking at this to see if they can declassify it sooner rather than later. But the sooner this comes out, the better off we all are. Because what I've said is what's left that's redacted, the American people really need to know what's underneath there.
Yeah, that's what I want to ask you about, because I read the op-ed this weekend with you in the Wall Street Journal, and it's titled Devin Nunes, Washington's Public Enemy #1. And in it you say, if people think using the Clinton dirt to get a FISA is bad, what else that's in that application is even worse. And you identify a specific number of pages in the letter you sent to President Trump that need to be redacted. Can you tell us anything about what could possibly be even worse than using an unverified piece of nonsense to actually get a warrant to spy on an American citizen?
Well, and therein lies the problem, right? So the mainstream media and the left, they can run out and say, well, what's really bad in there is the stuff that the public can't see. It's redacted. But the reality is that's not the case. Those of us who have been providing oversight over this issue, we've had several of our members who have been painstakingly going through it piece by piece, and we are quite confident that once the American people see these 20 pages, at least for those that will get real reporting on this issue, they will be shocked by what's in that FISA application.
Has the president read the unredacted portions?
I have no idea what the president has or has not read. Okay. All I know is that we sent him a letter back in June asking him to declassify those 20 pages or more. I mean, if they can declassify, the more the better. But I think the bulk of what we would like to see are 20 pages in the last FISA that was signed by the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein.
You know, it seems that the midterm elections become that much more important. The stakes are so high on these midterm elections. We wouldn't know any of this stuff without your committee and your colleagues at Judiciary and Oversight. We wouldn't know half of the stuff that took place in the 2016 elections. What happens if the House flips and the Democrats take the majority in the House come the midterm elections?
Well, that is what I said in the Wall Street Journal interview. Yeah, the Wall Street Journal interview over the weekend, I stated that I am quite confident, because I've seen this game played many times before. There's a stall game going on at DOJ and FBI. They're trying to stall as much as they can, hoping and betting that Republicans would lose the House in the fall. And if that happens, then it shuts down everything. Rod Rosenstein will not be held in contempt. FBI will not be held accountable. All these investigations will shut down. Everything will be buried. And you'll be left with media narratives saying, oh, what the public can't read, what you really can't read, what's blacked out, that's the really bad stuff against Carter Page and the Republicans and the Trump campaign. That's why the sooner the president declassifies this, the better. And I think the American people need to understand how important it's going to be to get out and vote in this election.
Well, tell us where your investigation stands right now. Is Rod Rosenstein performing? Do you think his leadership is encouraging them to be up front and show us justice?
Well, what I can tell you is that there was a move late last week to begin impeachment. I think there are grounds for impeachment, and we should hold them accountable. I think Congress has given up way too much power. The way I understand it is that the Judiciary Committee and Oversight Committee got commitments on Friday. I think the Speaker also got commitments, from what I understand, that documents will be provided. So we're short a few documents. We are supposed to see those this week. But in addition to that, interviews / depositions will begin over August. So we will have members of Congress that will be flying back to Washington during August to conduct interviews with very important witnesses that need to be interviewed as it relates to getting to the bottom of this Russiagate scandal.
Mr. Chairman, let me switch gears real quick and ask you about what's going on with Twitter and shadow banning. The president tweeted about it. Do you think social media is censoring conservative views and conservative speakers?
Yeah, you know what? I had no idea what shadow banning even was.
Right.
I had absolutely no clue. I had so for several months, people have been contacting me saying that, hey, I tried to find you on Twitter. I couldn't find your account. Why is that? And then you had a report that came out where, in fact, there were 4 people in the House of Representatives and the only 4 politicians in the country, the elected officials that were being, quote unquote, well, they don't call it shadow banning, but effectively we were getting caught up in some type of trap to where people couldn't see our Twitter feed. That was Mr. Gates, Mr. Meadows, Mr. Jordan, and myself.
Okay.
So I don't know what Twitter's up to. It sure looks to me like they're censoring people, and they ought to stop it. And we're looking at any legal remedies that we can go through.
Mr. Chairman, good to see you this morning. Thanks so much.